The night they called her the help, she fell to her knees, but he was the one who knelt beside her, silencing the entire ballroom with a single sentence. "She is my wife, my honor, my life." And just like that, in front of everyone, love conquered shame. But Chapter 1. The echo of cruel laughter still resonated in the main ballroom of the Grand Austin Hotel when Sophia Miller, 25, felt the world crumble at her feet. The navy blue dress she had sewn over 3 consecutive nights with her own 2 hands, her only hands, which knew the value of honest work, now bore a red wine stain that spread like shame across her chest. Her green eyes, usually as bright as emeralds under the Texan sun, filled with tears she refused to shed. "Can someone get this maid out of here?" shrieked Victoria Vanderbilt, a woman in her 40s whose contempt was as conspicuous as her fake jewelry. "This is not a party for the domestic staff." Sophia was on the marble floor, trying to clean up the mess someone had deliberately caused. The ballroom, decorated with marigolds and golden lights to celebrate the launch of the new Heart of Gold jewelry line, had become the stage for her deepest humiliation. The attendees, dressed in designer suits and expensive perfumes, looked at her as if she were invisible, as if her pain didn't even deserve a moment of compassion. Sophia had come there by a misunderstanding. She worked as a seamstress in a small shop in downtown Austin, where she created dresses for sweet 16s and brides with modest dreams. Her boss, Mrs. Gable, 58, had received an invitation to the event and, feeling ill that evening, had asked Sophia to go in her place to make contacts that could benefit the business. "Go on, honey," Mrs. Gable had told her, extending the invitation with trembling hands. "We need new clients. Maybe you'll find someone who appreciates your talent." But instead of opportunities, Sophia had found contempt. She had grown up in East Riverside, a humble neighborhood where red brick houses lined up like tired soldiers under the endless Texas sky. Her mother, Eleanor Miller, had died when she was just 15, leaving her to care for her younger sister, Lucy, who was 12 at the time. Her father, Robert, a 50-year-old man with the rough hands of a construction worker and a heart of gold, worked from dawn until dusk to keep their small family afloat. Sophia had learned to sew by watching her mother, who created miracles with scraps of fabric and a lot of love. "Hands that create beauty never know poverty of the soul," Eleanor used to tell her, while embroidering tiny flowers on a tablecloth she would sell to buy cough medicine for Lucy. Now at 25, Sophia was the very picture of simple grace. Her light brown hair fell in soft waves to the middle of her back, and her fair skin had the radiance only possessed by those who have known both sorrow and hope. She was petite, barely 5'3", but her presence radiated a quiet strength she had developed through years of premature responsibilities. "Look at that," Victoria continued to mock, pointing at her with her champagne flute. She probably stole that invitation. "These people are always trying to sneak into places they don't belong." The words pierced Sophia's heart like poisoned daggers. She stood up slowly, with the dignity her mother had taught her to maintain, even in the darkest moments. Her cheeks were flushed, not just from shame, but from the indignation that was beginning to boil inside her. "Excuse me," she whispered in a trembling voice, heading for the exit, as malicious murmurs followed her like shadows. It was then that the ballroom doors opened with a decisive sound. Dylan Moore entered the room like a controlled storm. At 31, he was the kind of man who commanded respect without needing to raise his voice. His black suit, tailored by an Italian designer, fit his athletic 6'1" frame perfectly. His jet black hair was impeccably combed back, and his blue eyes, an inheritance from his Spanish maternal grandmother, held the intensity of someone who had built an empire from scratch. Dylan was the owner of Moore Developments, a company that had transformed Austin's skyline with residential projects that combined luxury and sustainability. But he had arrived late to the party that night because he had been reviewing the blueprints for his next project, a housing complex for middle-income families, something his board of directors considered unprofitable. Seeing the scene unfolding before him, something ignited in his chest. For years he had navigated these social circles where cruelty was disguised as sophistication, but he had never witnessed such a blatant and gratuitous humiliation. "What's going on here?" he asked in a deep voice that cut through the laughter like a knife. Victoria approached him with a flirtatious smile, not realizing she had just signed her own social death warrant. "Dylan, darling, so glad you could make it. We were just having a little problem with an intruder." Dylan looked at Sophia, who was still standing near the wine stain, her hands trembling and her chin held high. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. Their eyes met for the first time, and the world stood still for an instant that felt eternal. He saw in her something he had been looking for without knowing it, pure authenticity in a world of masks. She saw in him something she didn't expect to find, genuine kindness behind a facade of power. An intruder? Dylan repeated without taking his eyes off Sophia. And who decided that? Well, it's obvious, Victoria replied with a nervous laugh. Look at her. She doesn't belong here. Dylan approached Sophia with slow, deliberate steps. The entire ballroom had fallen silent, as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something important. When he stood before her, he extended his hand. May I help you, miss? Sophia looked at him with suspicion. She had learned throughout her life that when something seemed too good to be true, it probably was. But there was something in this man's eyes that calmed her, an honesty that contrasted sharply with the scornful looks she had been receiving. I'm fine, she murmured, though it was clear she wasn't. No, Dylan replied firmly, but without harshness. You're not fine, and that's not acceptable. He took off his jacket, and in a gesture that would be remembered by everyone present for years, placed it over Sophia's shoulders to cover the wine stain. Excuse me, he said, heading for the event's microphone, leaving a stunned Sophia in the center of the ballroom. His voice resonated throughout the venue when he took the microphone that had been used for the evening's speeches. Ladies and gentlemen, Dylan began, his voice filled with an authority that brooked no interruption. Tonight we have witnessed something deplorable. A guest has been publicly humiliated for the simple fact of not belonging to a certain social circle. An uncomfortable murmur swept through the room. Victoria turned, visibly pale. I want you all to know, Dylan continued, that the young lady you have been insulting tonight shows more class and dignity in her silence than many of you do in your entire lives. Sophia felt her legs tremble. No one had ever defended her like that. She had never experienced what it felt like to be protected by someone else. Furthermore, Dylan added, stepping down from the small stage and walking towards Sophia, I want to officially introduce you to my special guest for this evening. The room was in total shock. Dylan approached Sophia and offered her his arm with the gallantry of a fairy tale prince. May I have this dance? He asked her softly, as the orchestra, following a signal from him, began to play a slow waltz. Sophia looked at him with wide eyes, unable to believe what was happening. But I don't know how to waltz, she whispered. Don't worry, Dylan replied with a smile that completely transformed his stern face. I'll lead. And so, under the astonished gaze of 200 people, Dylan Moore, one of the most powerful men in Austin, danced with Sophia Miller, a seamstress from downtown, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As they moved to the rhythm of the music, Dylan spoke to her in a low voice, just for her. What's your name? Sophia, she answered, still in shock. Sophia, he repeated, as if tasting the sound of her name. It's a beautiful name. It means wisdom. I know, she replied with a small smile, the first she had shown all night. And why are you here tonight, Sophia? She briefly explained about Mrs. Gable and the sewing shop, about her hope of finding new clients. Dylan listened attentively, without interrupting, without judging. You design dresses? He asked with genuine interest. Yes, Sophia replied, feeling her confidence slowly return. Since I was a little girl, I'd like to see your work someday. The song ended, but Dylan didn't immediately let go of her hands. They stood there in the center of the dance floor, looking into each other's eyes, as the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Thank you, Sophia whispered. Don't thank me, Dylan replied. I did what any decent person would have done. No, she said, shaking her head. Not everyone would have. You chose to see me when others chose to look right through me. Those words touched something deep in Dylan's heart. For years he had felt that he himself was invisible in certain ways, that people only saw his money and his power, but never really him. Can I take you home? Dylan asked. Sophia hesitated. In her world, men like Dylan Moore didn't take women like her home without expecting something in return. But there was something in his eyes that told her he was different. Okay, she finally murmured. As they were leaving the hotel, Dylan stopped in front of Victoria Vanderbilt, who had been watching everything with a mixture of horror and jealousy. Victoria, he said, in a voice as cold as steel, I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. It will be the last one you're invited to. They were not empty words. Dylan had enough influence to make good on that promise, and everyone in the ballroom knew it. The ride in Dylan's black Mercedes-Benz to Sophia's neighborhood passed in a comfortable silence. She looked out the window at the city lights she knew like the back of her hand, but which seemed different that night, as if she were seeing them with new eyes. Have you lived in Austin long? Dylan asked, breaking the silence. All my life, Sophia replied. I was born here at City General Hospital. My mother used to say I came into the world with the chimes of St. Mary's Cathedral. You must love this city very much. It's my home, she said simply. Every street, every corner has a story for me. When they arrived in front of Sophia's house, a modest red brick building with a small flowering crepe myrtle in the front, Dylan turned off the engine and stared at the facade. It's beautiful, he commented sincerely. It's small, Sophia replied with a shy smile. The most beautiful things are often small, Dylan said, and something in his tone let her know he wasn't just talking about the house. Sophia took off the jacket and handed it back to him. Thank you for everything. Sophia, Dylan said before she got out of the car. Could I see you again? Sophia's heart raced. Why would you want to do that? Dylan smiled, and it was a completely different smile from the one he had shown at the party. It was vulnerable, almost shy, because on a night full of people in disguise, you were the only one who was real. Sophia felt herself blush. I don't know if that's a good idea. Why? Because we're from very different worlds. Dylan looked at her seriously. Tonight showed me that worlds can collide in the most beautiful way. Before Sophia could answer, the door to her house opened and Lucy appeared, now 22, a younger version of Sophia with darker hair and the same expressive green eyes. Sophia, are you okay? I was waiting for you. Sophia sighed. I'll be right there, Luce. She turned to Dylan one last time. I work at Mrs. Gable's shop at 247 Willow Creek Drive. If you really want to see my work, I'll be there tomorrow, Dylan promised, without hesitation. Sophia got out of the car and walked to her house, feeling Dylan's eyes following her until she closed the door behind her. Inside, Lucy bombarded her with questions. Who was that man? Where do you know someone with a car like that? What happened at the party? Sophia sat on the small living room sofa, where her father was already asleep in front of the television after an exhausting day of work. She covered him with a blanket before answering her sister. I don't know, Luce, she murmured. I think he just changed my life, but I don't know if it was for better or for worse. That night, as she changed out of the stained dress, Sophia looked at herself in the mirror of the wardrobe that had belonged to her mother. For the first time in a long time, she saw something different in her reflection. She saw a woman who had been seen, truly seen by someone else, but along with that feeling of fulfillment came fear. What did Dylan Moore really want from her? And what would happen when he realized who she really was, where she came from, all the responsibilities she carried on her shoulders? She went to bed that night with her heart torn between hope and fear, not knowing that a few miles away in a mansion in the Westlake Hills, Dylan Moore couldn't sleep either, thinking about a pair of green eyes that had looked straight into the soul he thought he had lost long ago. The story was just beginning, but there was already something irrevocable in the Austin air that night, something that would forever change the destiny of two people who had learned to live in parallel worlds, never knowing they were destined to meet. Have you ever felt that a single night can change the course of your entire life? Have you experienced that instant connection that defies all logic? Tell us your experience in the comments, and don't forget to tell us from which beautiful American city you're reading from. Give us a like if you want to know what will happen when Dylan shows up at Sophia's shop. Chapter 2. The Austin sun streamed through the windows of Mrs. Gable's small shop like a golden blessing, illuminating spools of colored thread and fabrics, waiting to become tangible dreams. Sophia had arrived early that morning, as always, but her hands trembled slightly as she prepared her workstation. She hadn't been able to get Dylan's promise out of her mind. I'll be there tomorrow. Mrs. Carmen Gable, 58, was a small woman with an imposing presence, her grey hair pulled into a perfect bun and her brown eyes missing no detail. She had been a seamstress for 40 years and had seen fashions, economic crises and social changes come and go, but she had never lost her passion for creating beauty with her hands. Honey, she said to Sophia as she organized the day's patterns, you mentioned you met someone interesting at the party last night. Sophia had arrived that morning and told Mrs. Gable what had happened, omitting a few details so as not to worry her. She knew her boss loved her like a daughter, and she also knew she would worry if she knew such a powerful man had shown interest in her. He was just a kind person who helped me in a difficult moment, Sophia replied, focusing on the floral embroidery she was finishing for the Sweet 16 dress of Madison, the daughter of the neighborhood butcher. A kind person or a handsome man? Mrs. Gable asked with a sly smile. Before Sophia could answer, the small bell on the shop door chimed, announcing a customer's arrival. Both women looked up, expecting to see Mrs. Peterson, who came every Tuesday to pick up her dress alterations, but instead of the elderly lady, they saw Dylan Moore. He was dressed more casually than the night before, dark slacks and a white cotton shirt that highlighted his natural tan, but his presence was still commanding. In his hands, he held a bouquet of white gardenias, Sophia's favorite flower, as she'd mentioned during their conversation in the car. Mrs. Gable's mouth fell slightly open. In 40 years of running the shop, she had never had a visit from someone who radiated so much economic power. "Good morning," Dylan greeted with a friendly smile, addressing Sophia mainly, but not ignoring Mrs. Gable. "Sophia? Good morning," Sophia replied, feeling her cheeks flush. "Dylan, this is Mrs. Gable, my boss and my second mother." Dylan approached Mrs. Gable with the respect he would show his own mother. "It's an honor to meet you, ma'am. Sophia has spoken wonders of you." "Really?" Mrs. Gable asked, looking back and forth between Sophia and Dylan with growing curiosity. "Of course. She told me you taught her everything she knows about the business, that you're like a mother to her." Mrs. Gable felt herself melting at this man's genuine courtesy. "And you are Dylan Moore," he replied, extending his hand to shake hers. "I had the privilege of meeting Sophia at an event last night, and I was fascinated by her talent for design." "Are you the Dylan Moore?" Mrs. Gable asked, her eyes wide. "From Moore Developments?" Dylan smiled modestly. "The very same." Sophia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. During the night, she had researched Dylan a bit on Lucy's old smartphone and had discovered he wasn't just someone with money. He was one of the most influential businessmen in Texas, with a net worth that probably equaled the annual budget of her entire neighborhood. "These are for you," Dylan said, handing the gardenias to Sophia. "As an apology for the horrible way you were treated last night." "You didn't have to do this," Sophia murmured, but she took the flowers, inhaling their sweet scent that reminded her of her grandmother's garden. "I wanted to," Dylan replied simply. Mrs. Gable observed the interaction with expert eyes. She had seen many men in her life and had learned to distinguish between those with good intentions and those without. Something in the way Dylan looked at Sophia told her this man was different. "Would you like to see some of Sophia's work?" Mrs. Gable offered, earning a panicked look from her employee. "I'd love to," Dylan replied with genuine enthusiasm. For the next hour, Mrs. Gable showed Dylan a careful selection of Sophia's designs. There were sweet 16 dresses with intricate embroidery that told silent stories, wedding gowns that captured dreams in every stitch, and blouses with traditional Texan wildflower patterns that honored cultural roots without sacrificing modern elegance. Dylan examined each piece with a connoisseur's attention. Although his main expertise was in construction, he had developed an eye for quality and craftsmanship through years of evaluating finishes on his projects. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, holding up a sky-blue dress with embroidered birds that looked ready to take flight. "You designed this?" "Yes," Sophia answered shyly. "It was for my cousin Eleanor's wedding." "How long did it take you?" 3 weeks, working nights after the shop closed. Dylan looked at her with an admiration that was impossible to fake. "And did you study design in school?" Sophia shook her head. "My mother taught me the basics, and then I was self-taught, looking at magazines, experimenting." "This," Dylan said, pointing to the intricate embroidery, "is not learned just by looking at magazines. This is pure talent." At that moment, the bell on the door chimed again, and Lucy ran in, her hair disheveled and her eyes bright with curiosity. "Sophia, I came as soon as I could." "Oh," she stopped short when she saw Dylan. "Lucy," Sophia said with a resigned sigh, "this is Dylan. Dylan, my sister Lucy." "The younger sister," Dylan smiled, stepping forward to greet her. "Sophia told me about you last night." "Really?" Lucy asked with a mischievous grin. "And what did she say?" "That you're a pre-med student, and that she's very proud of you." Lucy looked at her sister in surprise. "You told him that?" Sophia shrugged. "It came up in conversation." What Sophia hadn't mentioned was how much Lucy's medical degree was costing her. She worked double shifts at the shop, did sewing jobs at night at home, and had sold the few pieces of jewelry she had inherited from her mother to pay for the first semester's tuition. "What year are you?" Dylan asked Lucy. "Junior year," she answered proudly. "I want to specialize in pediatrics." "That's a noble specialty," Dylan commented. "Children need doctors who really care about them." The conversation was interrupted when Madison Jones, a 14-year-old girl with round cheeks and eyes sparkling with excitement, arrived with her mother, Mrs. Rosa. "Sophia!" Madison shouted as she entered. "Is my dress ready yet?" "Almost, Princess," Sophia replied with a genuine smile. "Just a few final touches." Dylan watched the interaction with fascination. Seeing Sophia with Madison was like watching an older sister care for a younger one. There was so much affection, so much patience that he felt moved. "Are you the one coming to my party?" Madison asked Dylan with the disarming curiosity of teenagers. "Madison," her mother gently chided, "don't be disrespectful." "Don't worry," Dylan said with a smile. And no, I'm not going to your party, but I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. Why not? Sophia can invite you. She's going because she made my dress. Dylan looked at Sophia with a raised eyebrow. You're going to the party? I always go to my girls' sweet 16s, Sophia explained. It's a tradition. I like to see how the dresses look on their big day. Then I accept the invitation, Dylan said with a smile that made Sophia feel dizzy. Really? Madison asked excitedly. Madison, Sophia intervened quickly. Mr. Moore has more important things to do than go to a sweet 16 party. No, Dylan said firmly, looking directly at Sophia. I don't. The rest of the morning passed in a kind of dream. Dylan not only stayed at the shop, but helped organize fabrics, carried boxes of materials, and even learned to thread a needle under the amused tutelage of Mrs. Gable. For a millionaire businessman, you're not half bad at this sewing thing, Mrs. Gable commented as Dylan practiced making straight stitches on a piece of scrap fabric. My maternal grandmother was a seamstress, Dylan explained. When I was a kid, I spent summers with her back in Fredericksburg. She taught me that creating something with your hands is one of the purest forms of art. Sophia looked up from her work, surprised. I didn't know that. There are a lot of things you don't know about me, Dylan replied, and something in his tone suggested that he too had secrets like everyone. At lunchtime, Dylan insisted on treating them all to lunch downtown. Sophia protested, saying they had food at home, but Dylan was insistent. Please, he said with a smile that melted resistance. Allow me this small gesture. They went to Terry Black's BBQ, a traditional Austin spot that Dylan had specifically chosen because he knew Sophia would feel comfortable there. It was a place where the food was delicious, but the prices were reasonable, where working-class families could treat themselves without breaking the bank. During the meal, Dylan listened to stories about life in Sophia's neighborhood, about family traditions, about everyday dreams and struggles. He spoke little of himself, preferring to ask questions that showed a genuine interest in their lives. And your family? Sophia finally asked. Are they from Austin too? Dylan's expression darkened slightly. My mother died when I was 8. My father. Let's just say we don't have a close relationship. I'm sorry, Sophia murmured, understanding the pain of losing a mother. It was a long time ago, Dylan replied, but Sophia could see the wound was still fresh. And siblings? No, I'm an only child. Dylan smiled sadly. I always envied big, noisy families, full of life like yours. Lucy, who had been observing the interaction between her sister and Dylan with scientific interest, decided to ask the question they were all thinking. Why did you really come to the shop today? Lucy, Sophia chided, mortified. No, it's okay, Dylan said. It's a fair question. He turned to Lucy seriously. I came because last night I met someone who reminded me why I started my business in the first place. What do you mean? Asked Mrs. Gable. I started Moore Developments because I wanted to create homes for families, not just buildings for investors. But somewhere along the way I lost that vision. Last night, seeing Sophia's dignity in the face of the cruelty of people who think they're superior, I remembered who I wanted to be. His words fell like stones in a pond, creating ripples of silence. Besides, he added with a smile aimed specifically at Sophia, I wanted to get to know the bravest woman I've met in a long time. Sophia felt herself blush to the roots of her hair. I'm not brave. No? Dylan asked. Then what do you call a woman who keeps a family afloat, helps pay for her sister's college, takes care of a hard-working father, and still finds time to create art with her hands? That's just extraordinary, Dylan finished. That's extraordinary. The walk back to the shop was quiet, but it was a silence charged with possibilities. Sophia walked beside Dylan, keenly aware of his presence, of the scent of his cologne mixing with the smell of gardenias she still carried in her hands. Sophia, Dylan said when they reached the shop door, could I talk to you for a moment? Alone. Mrs. Gable and Lucy exchanged knowing glances before entering the shop, leaving them alone on the sidewalk. What are you doing? Sophia asked directly. What do you mean? This, she said, gesturing to the flowers, the space between them, the tension that had been building all day. You don't belong in my world, and I don't belong in yours. Dylan took a step closer. What if we created our own world? Sophia's heart raced dangerously. It doesn't work like that. Why not? Because, Sophia struggled to find the right words, because I have responsibilities. I have a family that depends on me. I have a life built here, in this neighborhood with these people. And you have a company to run, a status to maintain, a world full of people like the ones from last night. And what if none of that mattered to me? But it does matter to you, Sophia replied sadly. And it's okay that it does. I don't want to be the temporary whim of a rich man who wants to play at being different. The words hit Dylan like a slap. Is that what you think is happening here? I don't know, Sophia admitted, but I'm terrified it might be. Dylan was silent for a long moment, looking up at the sky where clouds were beginning to gather, threatening a typical Austin afternoon thunderstorm. "My grandmother," he said finally, "the seamstress from Fredericksburg I mentioned, used to tell me something when I was a boy." "What?" "She said that hands that create beauty never lie, that you can know a person's soul by seeing what their hands are capable of creating." Sophia felt a chill. Those were almost the exact same words her mother used to tell her. "Yesterday, seeing your work, seeing how you treated that girl Madison, seeing how you care for your sister and talk about your father, I saw a soul that is everything mine had forgotten how to be." "Dylan, I'm not asking you to trust me immediately," he continued. "I'm just asking for a chance to prove to you that this isn't a whim." Sophia looked at him for a moment that felt eternal. In his blue eyes she saw something she didn't expect, genuine vulnerability. This powerful man, this titan of industry, was looking at her as if she held the power to heal or destroy him. "One chance," she murmured. "One chance," he confirmed. "But with conditions." Dylan smiled, the first genuinely happy smile he had shown all day. "I'm listening. No expensive gifts. No trying to change me or my life. And if at any point this becomes a game for you, you tell me immediately." "Deal," Dylan said, extending his hand. Sophia shook it, feeling like she had just made the riskiest decision of her life. "And one more thing," she added. "What?" "You really have to come to Madison's party. You made a promise to a 16-year-old, and in my family, promises to kids are sacred." Dylan let out a laugh that echoed down the street. "It will be an honor." When Sophia entered the shop, she found Mrs. Gable and Lucy pretending to work, but obviously waiting for a full report. "Well?" Lucy asked immediately. "Well what? Are you two going out?" Sophia sighed, sitting at her workstation and picking up Madison's embroidery again. "We're going to get to know each other." "What does that mean?" Lucy insisted. "It means," Mrs. Gable answered with a wise smile, "that our Sophia has just opened the door to an adventure." That afternoon, as the sky darkened with storm clouds, Sophia worked on Madison's dress with renewed energy. Each stitch seemed more confident, each embroidery more intricate. It was as if she had found a new inspiration, a new purpose, but along with the excitement came fear. What would happen when Dylan really saw how she lived, when he met her father, with his calloused hands and direct way of speaking, when he saw the small house, the old furniture, the reality of a life built with little money but a lot of love, and more importantly, what would happen when she saw how he lived? Could she maintain her identity in a world of luxury and sophistication, or would she get lost, trying to be someone she wasn't? The storm arrived that night as promised, with lightning that lit up the sky and thunder that shook the windows. Sophia lay awake listening to the rain beat against the tin roof, thinking of blue eyes and whispered promises, not knowing that a few miles away, Dylan was also awake, looking out the window of his home office, wondering if he had finally found the person who could teach him how to be human again. Fate had set forces in motion that neither of them could control, and all that was left was to wait and see if their newly created world could survive the storms that were sure to come. Chapter 3. The following days brought a strange and wonderful routine that transformed Sophia's life in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Dylan would show up at the shop every morning at 9 o'clock sharp, not in the black Mercedes he had used the first time, but in a more modest Ford pickup he had bought specifically to avoid drawing too much attention in the neighborhood. Mrs. Gable had started joking that she'd gained a free employee because Dylan didn't just observe Sophia's work. He had insisted on learning the basic sewing techniques. His large hands, accustomed to blueprints and construction materials, initially struggled with the delicacy required to handle fabric, but he had a determination that impressed everyone. "Why is it so important for you to learn this?" Sophia asked him one morning as he practiced making buttonholes on a scrap piece of fabric. "Because it's important to you," Dylan answered simply, focused on keeping his stitches even. "And because I want to understand how you see the world through this art." It was Thursday of the second week since they had met, and Sophia had begun to get used to Dylan's presence in her daily routine. There was something comforting in seeing him sitting in the small chair Mrs. Gable had found for him, bent over his work with the same seriousness he likely applied to his multi-million-dollar construction projects. "Sophia," Lucy said, entering the shop with a worried expression, "I need to talk to you." "What's wrong?" Sophia asked immediately, putting down the embroidery she was doing for Madison's dress. "It's about Dad." Dylan looked up, instantly alert. During the 2 weeks he had been coming to the shop, he had noticed that Sophia always tensed up when her father was mentioned. "What happened to him?" Sophia asked, already standing up. He hurt his back on the construction site. The doctors say he needs complete rest for at least a month. Sophia's face paled. Her father, Robert Miller, 53, was the family's main provider. His job as a construction foreman not only paid the basic bills, but also helped with Lucy's tuition if he couldn't work for a month. "How much do we need to cover expenses?" Sophia asked automatically, already doing mental calculations of how many extra jobs she could take. "About $5,000, Lucy answered in a small voice. "Just for the basics and my tuition for next semester." Sophia sat down heavily. $5,000 was more than she earned in 2 months at the shop, even with extra work. "It's okay," she murmured, more to herself than to Lucy. "It's okay. I can make more dresses at night, maybe some alterations for the downtown stores, and I can help," Dylan said softly. "No," Sophia replied immediately, more harshly than she had intended. "No, thank you." "Sophia, be reasonable. To me, $5,000 is not—" "Exactly," Sophia exploded, standing up again. "To you it's nothing. To me it's my dignity." The shop fell into a tense silence. Mrs. Gable, who had been pretending to organize thread in the corner, cleared her throat. "Maybe I should—" Lucy began. "No," Sophia said, taking a deep breath. "You two stay. Dylan and I need to talk about this." "Sophia," Dylan began, approaching her carefully. "I'm not trying to hurt your pride." "Aren't you?" she asked, turning to face him. "Then what are you doing?" "I'm trying to help the woman who—" Dylan stopped, the words he wanted to say getting stuck in his throat. "Who what?" Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Who means more to me than she should after only 2 weeks, Dylan admitted, raw vulnerability in his voice. The words floated in the air between them like something alive and dangerous. Lucy and Mrs. Gable exchanged glances and silently decided they needed to be anywhere else. "Let's go get some coffee," Mrs. Gable murmured, pulling Lucy toward the door. "We'll be back in an hour." When they were alone, Sophia sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "Do you know what my biggest fear is?" she asked without looking at him. "Tell me. That you become my savior, that I become your charity project, that we lose this." She made a vague gesture between them. "Because financial needs got in the way." Dylan knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands carefully. "And do you know what mine is?" Sophia shook her head. "That you think I'm like all the other rich men who believe they can buy whatever they want. That you don't understand that what I want can't be bought." "And what do you want?" Dylan looked directly into her eyes. "I want to know all your fears and help you face them. I want to know what makes you smile when you think no one is watching. I want to understand why you embroider flowers on all your designs. I want—" "Dylan," Sophia whispered. "I want you to let me love you," he finished, the words coming out like a confession he had been holding back for days. Sophia's heart stopped for a moment before starting to beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. "You don't know me well enough to love me," she murmured. "Don't I?" Dylan asked with a sad smile. "I know you get up every morning at 5 to make breakfast for your family before coming to the shop. I know you save the last donut for Lucy, even though it's your favorite. I know you cry when you finish a wedding dress because you say each one carries a piece of your heart." Sophia stared at him in amazement. "How do you know all that?" "Because I've been paying attention. Because every little detail of your life fascinates me." "But you still don't know the ugly parts," Sophia insisted. "You don't know that sometimes I wake up in a panic in the middle of the night, wondering if I'll be able to pay all the bills. You don't know that there are nights I cry from exhaustion, but can't stop working because my family depends on me. You don't know that you have nightmares since your mother died, and that you sometimes wake up screaming her name." Dylan interrupted her softly. Sophia froze. "How?" "Lucy told me. She was worried about you. She told me that since you were kids, you've carried responsibilities that weren't yours to bear." Tears began to roll down Sophia's cheeks. "Why did she tell you that?" "Because she loves me and wants me to understand you completely." Sophia covered her face with her hands. "This is too complicated." "No," Dylan said, taking her hands and pulling them away from her face. "This is simple. I feel something for you that I've never felt before. You feel something for me too. Don't try to deny it. The rest, we can figure out the rest together. Even my financial problems, especially your financial problems, but not in the way you think." Sophia looked at him with curiosity. "I've been thinking," Dylan continued, "about a business proposal. A business proposal. My company is developing a new residential complex, 500 homes for middle-income families. We need a textile designer to create curtains, cushions, decorative elements that make those houses feel like homes." Sophia's heart sped up, but she forced herself to keep her voice calm. "And I'm offering you the contract. The payment would be $20,000 up front, plus royalties for each unit sold." Dylan, Sophia began, but he cut her off. Before you say no, let me finish. I've seen your work. I've seen how Madison looks at you when she tries on her dress. I've seen how your designs don't just cover bodies, they tell stories. That's exactly what I need for this project. And what if things between us don't work out? The contract exists regardless of what happens between us, Dylan replied firmly. It's a business agreement based on your talent, not my feelings. Sophia was silent for a long moment, considering the offer. It was exactly what she needed, arriving at the exact moment she needed it. It was too convenient to be true. Can I see the contract before I decide? Of course. I'll have it sent over tomorrow. And can I run it by Mrs. Gable? I insist that you do. Sophia took a deep breath. Okay, I'll consider your offer. And will you also consider giving me a real chance to win your heart? Sophia's cheeks flushed. That's already happening, she admitted, in a voice so low he had to lean in to hear her. What did you say? I said it's already happening, Sophia repeated, a little louder. You're winning my heart, and it terrifies me. Dylan felt as if he could conquer the world with his bare hands. Why does it terrify you? Because I've never had something just for me. I've always been the big sister, the responsible daughter, the reliable employee. I've never just been Sophia. With me, you'll just be Sophia, Dylan promised. The extraordinary woman who fell in love with me in a ballroom full of people who didn't deserve her. Fell in love with you? Sophia asked with a mischievous smile. Who told you that? Your eyes, Dylan replied, moving closer to her. Your eyes told me. They were so close now that Sophia could see the small lines around Dylan's eyes, could smell his cologne mixing with the scent of new fabrics in the shop. Her heart was beating so fast, she was sure he could hear it. Dylan, she whispered. Yes? If you're going to kiss me, do it now before I lose my nerve. He didn't need to be told twice. His lips found hers with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity that had been building between them for weeks. It was a kiss that tasted of whispered promises and shared dreams, a kiss that changed something fundamental in both of them. When they parted, Sophia rested her forehead against his. Now what? She asked. Now, Dylan said with a smile that completely transformed his face. Now we start writing our story. The bell on the door chimed, announcing the return of Mrs. Gable and Lucy with coffees and knowing smiles. Are you two friends again? Lucy asked directly. Lucy, Mrs. Gable chided, though she was smiling too. We weren't fighting, Sophia replied, subconsciously touching her lips. Of course you weren't, Lucy said sarcastically. You were just having a very intense discussion about embroidery techniques. Dylan let out a laugh. Your sister is very perceptive. She's a meddler, Sophia corrected, but her smile took all the sting out of her words. A meddler who loves you both very much, added Mrs. Gable, and who is very happy to see you happy. The rest of the afternoon passed in a completely different atmosphere. Dylan helped Sophia finish the final details on Madison's dress, which looked more beautiful than ever, with small pearls he had suggested adding around the neckline. They weren't expensive pearls, but small glass beads that created the same elegant effect for a fraction of the cost. How did you know that would work? Sophia asked as she admired the result. My grandmother used to say that real luxury is in the details, not the price, Dylan replied. A well-thought-out detail can make something simple look extraordinary. Like you with me, Sophia murmured without thinking. Dylan looked at her with surprise, and then with a tenderness that made her melt. No, like you with me. That evening, when Dylan said goodbye at the shop door, he did so by taking Sophia's hand and kissing her gently on the cheek. Tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow, she confirmed. And Sunday. What's happening Sunday? Madison's party. Is my invitation still good? Sophia smiled. Of course. But I'm warning you, you're going to meet the whole neighborhood. They're going to ask you 1,000 questions and judge whether you're good enough for me. Seems fair, Dylan replied. I want to meet the people who raised and shaped you, too. When Sophia got home that night, she found her father sitting in the small living room, his back propped up by several cushions, and a look of frustration on his face. Robert Miller was a strongly built man, with calloused hands that told the story of 30 years of hard work, and brown eyes that had always radiated strength. Seeing him vulnerable was something Sophia still hadn't fully processed. How are you feeling, Dad? She asked, sitting on the small sofa beside him. Like a useless old man, Robert answered bitterly. You're not old and you're definitely not useless, Sophia said firmly. You just need time to heal. And in the meantime, how are we going to pay the bills? Lucy's school? Sophia took her father's rough hands in hers. I already have a plan. I landed a big contract, Dad. We're going to be okay. Robert looked at her with curiosity. What kind of contract? Sophia told him about Dylan's proposal, careful to present it as a pure business opportunity without mentioning the romantic nature of her relationship with him. "And you trust this man?" Robert asked after hearing the whole story. It was a simple question, but it contained 30 years of experience protecting his daughters from a world that wasn't always kind to working women. "Yes," Sophia answered without hesitation. "I trust him." Robert studied his daughter for a long moment. He knew her better than anyone, and he could see something different in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. "Is it just business?" he asked softly. Sophia felt herself blush. "No." "Does he treat you right?" "Better than I knew was possible." Robert nodded slowly. "Then I want to meet him, properly." "What does that mean?" "It means I want him to come for dinner on Saturday, in this house. I want to see how he behaves here, in our world, not his." Sophia felt a knot in her stomach. "Dad, our house is very different from what he's used to." "Exactly," Robert replied, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's precisely the test." That night, Sophia lay in bed thinking about what it would be like to have Dylan in her home, seeing how they really lived, meeting her father in his natural environment. It was one thing for him to come to the shop, where there was an element of neutrality, but inviting him into her home felt like baring her soul completely. But maybe it was time. Maybe it was time to find out if what they were building between them could survive the full reality of their different worlds. Friday arrived with the promise of the weekend, and all the uncertainties it would bring. Dylan showed up at the shop as usual, but Sophia noticed he seemed nervous, which was strange for a man who normally radiated confidence. "Everything okay?" she asked, as he struggled with a particularly complicated pattern. "My father called last night," Dylan replied without looking up from his work. "Your father?" "Raymond Moore. He heard rumors about me and a certain downtown seamstress. He wants to meet you." Sophia's stomach sank. "What kind of rumors?" "The kind he doesn't like. The kind that suggest his son is considering something serious with someone who doesn't belong in his social circle." "And what did you tell him?" Dylan finally looked up, and Sophia saw a fierce determination in his eyes. "I told him it was true, and that if he didn't like it, he could keep his opinion to himself." Dylan: "No, Sophia. This is important. He needs to know I'm not going to hide you. He needs to know I'm proud of what we have." Sophia felt her heart swell with an emotion she didn't know how to name. "Even if it means trouble with your family?" "Especially then," Dylan replied firmly. It was then that Sophia gathered the courage to extend the invitation she had been putting off. "Dylan, my father wants to meet you. He wants you to come for dinner tomorrow." Dylan froze for a moment, and then a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Really? Really? But you need to know it's going to be different. We'll be eating at the Formica table in the kitchen, not in some elegant dining room. The house is small, noisy, full of love," Dylan finished. "Full of love, and I can't wait to see it." The simplicity of his answer, the genuine sincerity in his voice, made Sophia realize she might have been worrying for nothing. Maybe Dylan was exactly who he seemed to be, a man who valued authenticity over appearances. "Okay," she said finally, "but I'm warning you. Lucy is going to ask you embarrassing questions, and my father is going to evaluate you like you're a presidential candidate." "Sounds perfect," Dylan replied, taking her hand and kissing it gently. "It's about time I found out if I'm good enough for the Miller family. Have you ever had to introduce someone special to your family, knowing it was a moment that could change everything? Have you felt that mix of excitement and terror when two worlds you love are about to collide? Share your experience in the comments and give us a like if you want to know how Dylan fares at his first dinner with Sophia's family. And don't forget to tell us from which beautiful city you're reading from. The story was about to take a decisive turn, and both Sophia and Dylan could feel that the next 48 hours would determine if what they had built between them could survive the ultimate test: family and social acceptance in both their worlds. Chapter 4. Saturday arrived with the kind of clear sky that only Austin, Texas could offer, the deep blue a stark contrast to the lazy white clouds floating over the red brick roofs of Sophia's neighborhood. Dylan had spent the morning in a state of nervousness he hadn't felt since his first business presentations, changing clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a white cotton shirt, casual but respectful, the perfect balance for a first family dinner. Sophia, for her part, had been cooking since 5 in the morning. She had prepared a brisket with all the love and patience her grandmother had taught her, letting it slow cook for hours. Alongside it were fresh cornbread, coleslaw, and her specialty, a pecan pie she had perfected over years of Sunday practice. The small Miller house smelled of culinary glory, but she couldn't stop obsessively checking every detail. "Sophia, please sit down," Lucy begged her for the 10th time that afternoon. "You've wiped that table 4 times in the last hour. What if he doesn't like the food? What if he thinks the house is too small? What if Dad asks him really personal questions? Sophia continued to wipe down surfaces that already gleamed. Robert, sitting in his recliner with a shiner box in hand, watched his eldest daughter's maneuvers with a mix of amusement and paternal understanding. At 53, he had learned to read people, especially his daughters, and he could see that Sophia was experiencing something entirely new. She was truly in love for the first time in her life. "Honey," Robert said in a calm voice, "if this man can't appreciate a house full of love and a meal made from the heart, then he's not the right man for you." Lucy, who was setting plates on the small kitchen table, the only table they had, nodded vigorously. "Besides, if he runs off because Dad asks him uncomfortable questions, it's better he leaves now." Sophia paused in the middle of her frantic cleaning and looked at her family. Her father, in his favorite plaid shirt that she had mended 3 times, his hard-working hands resting on the arms of the recliner they'd bought second-hand 5 years ago. Lucy, beautiful and bright, wearing one of the dresses Sophia had made for her college classes. This was her reality, her world, her most precious treasure. "What if we're too different?" Sophia murmured. "And what if you're not, where it matters?" Robert answered wisely. At 6 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. Dylan had arrived in his Ford pickup, not just to be discreet, but because he had brought something special. When Sophia opened the door, she found him holding a large, distinctive pink box that gave off an unmistakable aroma. "Good evening," Dylan greeted with a nervous smile that made him look younger. "I brought donuts from Round Rock Donuts. I hope that's not too presumptuous." "Round Rock Donuts," Lucy interrupted, appearing behind Sophia. "That's our favorite bakery." "I know," Dylan replied, visibly relaxing. "Sophia mentioned you all liked them. It was a perfect touch." He hadn't brought expensive wine or exotic flowers that would have created a barrier of economic difference. He had brought something from the area, something that was already part of the Miller family's traditions. Come in," Sophia said, stepping aside. "My father is eager to meet you." Robert had managed to get up from his chair, despite his back pain, and was waiting on his feet in the small living room. He was an imposing man even in his injured state, with a presence that spoke of decades of honest work and family responsibility. "Mr. Miller," Dylan said, approaching immediately with his hand extended. "It's an honor to finally meet you. Sophia speaks of you with such affection and respect." Robert studied Dylan for a moment that felt eternal before shaking his hand. The grip was firm, direct, the kind of handshake between men that conveys more information than 1,000 words. "Dylan," Robert replied, "have a seat, please. I think we have a lot to talk about." For the next 30 minutes, Robert subjected Dylan to the most polite yet exhaustive interrogation Sophia had ever witnessed. He asked about his business, his family, his intentions, his values, and even his political views. Dylan answered every question with refreshing honesty, without trying to impress or give answers he thought Robert wanted to hear. "And what's your take on a woman having her own career?" Robert asked, a loaded question considering both Sophia and Lucy were fiercely independent. "I think it's natural," Dylan answered immediately. "My grandmother worked her whole life as a seamstress and was the strongest woman I ever knew. Talent doesn't have a gender, and wasting anyone's talent because of their sex is just foolish." Robert nodded approvingly. "And what do you think about the fact that Sophia supports this family just as much as I do?" "I think she's extraordinary," Dylan said, looking directly at Sophia. "And any man who has the privilege of being with her should be proud to support that strength, not try to diminish it." It was in that moment that Sophia realized Dylan wasn't trying to impress her father by pretending to be someone he wasn't. He was being completely authentic, and that authenticity was earning Robert's respect step by step. "Dinner's ready," Sophia finally announced, more to save Dylan from the interrogation than because the food couldn't wait a few more minutes. The kitchen table, which normally seated 3 comfortably, felt intimate with 4. Dylan insisted on helping serve, and Sophia noticed how he moved naturally in the small space, making no comment about the size of the kitchen or the old appliances. "Mr. Miller," Dylan said after tasting the brisket, "this is the best brisket I have ever eaten in my life." "It's my wife's recipe," Robert replied with a smile that completely softened his expression. "Eleanor perfected it over years. Sophia inherited it, along with her golden hands." "Tell me about her," Dylan asked softly. "About your wife." What followed was a conversation that completely transformed the atmosphere of the dinner. Robert spoke about Eleanor with the love of a man who had found his soulmate and lost her far too soon. He told stories of their courtship, their early years of marriage, how Eleanor had been the force that held the family together during hard times. "She used to say," Robert continued, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, that hands that create beauty never know poverty of the soul. Dylan, visibly startled. My grandmother used to say the exact same thing. Really? Sophia asked, surprised. Word for word, Dylan confirmed. Dolores Moore ne Garcia. She was a seamstress in Fredericksburg. Robert and Dylan looked at each other for a long moment, and something passed between them, a silent, masculine understanding that spoke of shared values and similar losses. How did your wife pass away? Dylan asked, with the kind of respect only someone who had experienced deep loss could show. Cancer, Robert answered simply. She fought for 2 years, died at home, surrounded by her daughters with my hand in hers. My mother died in a car accident when I was 8, Dylan shared. I never got the chance to say goodbye. The silence that followed wasn't awkward but reverent. It was the silence of men who had known loss and had learned to carry it with dignity. And your father? Robert eventually asked. Dylan's expression hardened slightly. Raymond Moore is a complicated man. He built an empire, but in the process he lost the ability to connect with people, including his son. Is that why you started your own company? Partially. I wanted to prove you could be successful without sacrificing your humanity in the process. Lucy, who had been watching the entire conversation as if it were a tennis match, finally decided to intervene. What are your intentions with my sister? She asked directly, earning shocked looks from Sophia and Robert. Lucy! Sophia exclaimed, mortified. It's a valid question, Dylan said with a smile, and it deserves an honest answer. He turned to look directly at Sophia before continuing. My intentions are to know her completely, to love her completely, and if she'll let me, to build a life together that honors both where she comes from and where we're going. Sophia's heart stopped for a moment. It was the most beautiful and terrifying declaration she had ever heard. And what does that mean in practical terms? Robert pressed, returning to his fatherly interrogation mode. It means I want her to be a part of my life, and I a part of hers, in a way that strengthens us both, Dylan replied. It means I'm not going to ask her to change who she is or where she comes from. It means any future we build will include this family, because you all shaped her into the extraordinary woman I'm falling in love with. Robert was silent for a long moment, studying Dylan with eyes that had seen many things in life. Finally, he nodded. All right, he said simply. All right. After dinner, while Lucy and Dylan washed the dishes, a chore he had insisted on sharing despite everyone's protests, Robert took Sophia into the small living room. What do you think? Sophia asked nervously. I think he's a good man, Robert replied. I think he really sees you, not as a trophy or a project. And I think if you let him go out of fear, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. But we're so different. In some ways, yes, but in the ways that matter, values, respect, the capacity for love, you're the same. That night, after Dylan left with promises to pick Sophia up early for Madison's party the next day, the Miller family sat in the living room to process the evening's events. Did you see how he didn't complain once about having to turn sideways to get between the table and the wall? Lucy commented. Did you see how he asked about the story behind every photo on the wall? Robert added. Did you see how he looked at me when he thought no one was watching? Sophia murmured. Like you were the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen in his life, Lucy replied with a smile. The Sunday of Madison's party arrived with the kind of festive energy that only American celebrations could generate. The Oak Springs Community Hall, located in the heart of the neighborhood, had been transformed into a Sweet 16 palace with pink and gold decorations, balloons reaching the ceiling, and a dance floor that promised to be the center of many memories that night. Dylan arrived to pick up Sophia at exactly 5 o'clock, dressed in a navy suit that was elegant, without being ostentatious. Sophia wore a dress she had made especially for the occasion, sky blue with small butterfly embroidery in gold thread, making her look like a sophisticated version of herself. You're beautiful, Dylan murmured when she opened the door. Thank you, Sophia replied, nervously adjusting the faux pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. Ready to meet the whole neighborhood. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, Dylan answered, and Sophia could see he meant it. The hall was already packed when they arrived. 3 generations of the Jones family had gathered to celebrate Madison, along with neighbors, school friends, and basically anyone who had touched the teenager's life in her 16 years. Sophia! Madison screamed from across the hall, running toward her with open arms. Her dress, the dress Sophia had created with so much love, made her look like a fairy tale princess. The soft pink contrasted perfectly with her tanned skin, and the hand-sewn floral embroidery caught the light from the decorations like tiny stars. Madison, you look absolutely radiant, Sophia said, hugging the birthday girl with tears in her eyes. It was the moment she loved most about her job, seeing her clients shine on their special day. "And you brought your boyfriend," Madison exclaimed without any subtlety, looking at Dylan with brazen curiosity. "Madison," Sophia gently chided, but Dylan laughed. "It's an honor to meet you, Madison," Dylan said, giving a small bow that made the teenager giggle with delight. "And I have to say that dress is absolutely perfect on you, right?" "Sophia is the best seamstress in the world," Madison proclaimed, with the absolute confidence of a teenager. What followed was an exhaustive tour of introductions. Madison insisted on introducing Dylan to every member of her extended family, her godparents, her friends, and basically anyone willing to listen. "This is Sophia's boyfriend," Madison would announce to each new group. "He's rich, but he's a good guy." Sophia was mortified with each introduction, but Dylan handled everyone with grace and genuine humor. He talked football with the uncles, complimented the food with the aunts, and even managed to hold a conversation about reality TV with the grandmothers. The most tense moment came when Mr. Jones, the patriarch of the family, and a man known for having no filter, approached them. "So you're the businessman who's courting our Sophia?" Mr. Jones asked without preamble. "Yes, sir," Dylan replied respectfully. "And what do you want with her?" The conversation around them gradually quieted as those nearby realized they were witnessing a public grilling. "I want to love her the way she deserves to be loved," Dylan answered simply, his voice clear and firm for all to hear. Mr. Jones studied him for a long moment. "And how does our Sophia deserve to be loved?" "Like the extraordinary woman she is, with respect, with admiration, and with gratitude that someone like her chose to give me a chance." An approving murmur rippled through the gathered group. Mr. Jones nodded slowly. "All right," he finally declared, "but if you hurt her, you'll have the whole neighborhood to answer to." "I won't hurt her," Dylan promised, and there was something in his voice that made everyone present believe him. The music started up soon after, with a local country band taking the stage. Dylan proved that his waltz lessons from high society parties translated surprisingly well to the two-step. He danced with Madison, with the grandmothers during a slow song, and with Sophia for every chance he got. "Are you having fun?" Sophia asked during a break between songs. "I'm having more fun than I've had in years," Dylan answered honestly. "This is real life, isn't it? This is what I've been missing." "What have you been missing?" "Genuine connection. Celebrations that mean something. People who laugh because they're happy, not because it's the socially correct thing to do." Sophia felt her heart swell. "You don't feel out of place?" "I feel like I've found my place," Dylan replied, spinning her around the dance floor as the music filled the air. The perfect moment of the night came during the gift opening. A table was piled high with cards and presents. As Madison opened the cards, her mother collected the money into a basket labeled Madison's College Fund. Dylan watched, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What's happening?" he asked Sophia. "It's for her college fund," she explained. "Everyone chips in a little to help her get started." "Can I contribute?" "Of course, but don't feel obligated to." Dylan was already pulling out his wallet. He walked over to the table and discreetly slipped a sealed envelope into the basket when no one was looking directly at him. It wasn't until later, when Madison's mother came over to Sophia with tears in her eyes to show her the check Dylan had written, enough to cover Madison's entire first year of community college, that Sophia understood the magnitude of what he had done. "Why?" she asked Dylan when they were finally alone in the hall's parking lot, after saying goodbye to the entire Jones family at least 3 times. "Because I saw the same spark in her eyes that I see in yours," Dylan replied. "Because I believe in investing in the dreams of good people, and because I wanted to do something that would make you proud of me." Sophia felt tears stream down her cheeks. "Dylan, I'm already proud of you. You're already what?" he asked softly, moving closer until they were almost touching. "I'm already in love with you," Sophia admitted, the words escaping like a confession she had been holding back for weeks. Dylan felt as if the world had stood still. He took her in his arms and kissed her under the parking lot lights, the sound of festive music still floating on the Austin night air. When they parted, they both knew something had irrevocably changed between them. They were no longer two people exploring an attraction. They were two people in love, navigating toward an uncertain but possible future. "Now what?" Sophia asked, resting her forehead against his. "Now," Dylan said with a smile that promised 1,000 future adventures, "now we start the hard part." "What's the hard part?" "Making this work in the real world, with all the pressures, all the expectations, all the people who are going to try to tell us we don't belong together." Sophia felt a shiver of premonition. She had been so wrapped up in the perfect bubble of the last few weeks that she had forgotten a larger, more complicated world existed outside her neighborhood and Mrs. Gable's shop. "Do you think we can?" she asked. "I think it's worth a try," Dylan answered, kissing her forehead gently. "I think what we have is worth any fight we have to face." That night, as Dylan drove her home, neither of them knew that the most difficult test of their relationship would begin the very next day. Neither knew that the forces watching from the shadows were about to make their move, or that the perfect world they had been building together was about to be tested in ways neither had imagined. But that night, driving through the familiar streets of Austin with the woman he loved by his side and the taste of their happiness still fresh on his lips, Dylan felt like the luckiest man in the world. And Sophia, watching the lights of her hometown pass by the window while the hand of the man she loved rested in hers, felt for the first time in her life like she was exactly where she belonged. Have you ever had a night so perfect you wished it would never end? Have you experienced that moment when you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with the right person? Chapter 5. Monday arrived as a cruel reminder that perfect fairy tales rarely exist in the real world. Dylan had woken up with a smile he hadn't been able to erase since the night before, but that smile vanished quickly when he arrived at his office and found his assistant, Caroline Vance, waiting for him with a worried expression. "Good morning, Mr. Moore," greeted Caroline, an efficient woman of 35 who had been with the company for 8 years. "Your father called 3 times this morning. He says it's urgent." Dylan felt his stomach sink. Raymond Moore never called the office unless it was to create problems, and 3 calls meant the storm he had been avoiding had finally arrived. "Did he say what it was about?" "Only that he needed to see you immediately. And—" Caroline hesitated. "And what?" "And that you should bring your friend with you." Dylan felt the blood freeze in his veins. If his father was asking to meet Sophia, it wasn't to welcome her to the family. Meanwhile, at Mrs. Gable's shop, Sophia was working with renewed energy on her new project, the designs for Dylan's residential complex. She had spent all Sunday morning sketching patterns for curtains that captured the essence of different regions of Texas, each telling a visual story of the state's rich cultural heritage. "Look at this," she told Mrs. Gable, showing her a design inspired by hill country wildflowers. "I want every family who lives in these houses to feel like they're connected to something bigger than themselves." "It's beautiful, honey," Mrs. Gable replied, but there was something in her voice that made Sophia look up. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Gable was holding a copy of the morning paper, the Austin American Statesman, with an expression Sophia had never seen before. "What does it say?" Sophia asked, a knot forming in her stomach. Instead of answering, Mrs. Gable handed her the paper. In the society section, there was a photo of Dylan and Sophia dancing at Madison's party. Someone had snapped the picture without them noticing and sold it to the paper. The headline read, "The Tycoon and the Seamstress, Real Romance or a Millionaire's Whim?" Sophia read the article with growing horror. The reporter had dug into her personal life, spoken to neighbors, and turned their love story into a public spectacle. It mentioned her humble background, her mother's death, her family's financial struggles, but the worst part was the condescending tone, as if she were an exotic animal Dylan had decided to collect. "Sources close to the Moore family expressed surprise at the entrepreneur's romantic choice," Sophia read aloud, "especially considering Miss Miller has no college education or experience in the social circles where Moore moves." Sophia's hands trembled as she continued to read. The article wasn't just invasive, it was deliberately cruel. It painted Dylan as a bored rich man experimenting with authentic love, and her as a naive woman being manipulated by a world she didn't understand. "Don't pay any attention to this," Mrs. Gable said firmly. "Journalists write trash to sell papers." But Sophia was already imagining the repercussions. Her entire neighborhood would have read the article. People would talk, judge, speculate. And worst of all, Dylan would have to deal with the fallout in his world too. Her phone rang at that moment. It was Dylan. "Sophia, did you see the paper?" "Yes," she answered in a small voice. "I'm on my way over. Don't leave the shop until I get there." "Why? What's happening?" "My father wants to meet you," Dylan said, and something in his voice made Sophia understand it wasn't a social invitation. "Dylan, everything's going to be okay," he said, but Sophia could hear the strain in his voice. "Just don't believe anything that article says, okay?" After hanging up, Sophia stared at the newspaper. A photo that had captured one of the happiest moments of her life had been turned into ammunition for those who wanted to destroy what she and Dylan had built. Dylan arrived at the shop 20 minutes later, and Sophia could see immediately that something had changed. He was still the same caring man she had fallen in love with, but there was a tension in his shoulders, a hardness in his eyes that hadn't been there the day before. What did your father say exactly? Sophia asked, after they had greeted each other with a kiss that felt more desperate than romantic. He wants to see us both in his office at 3 o'clock, Dylan answered. He says we need to clarify this situation before it gets any more out of control. What if I don't go? Then he'll make today's article look like a charming society note compared to what he can have them published tomorrow. Sophia felt fear spread through her chest like ice. Your father has that much power? My father has connections in every major media outlet in Texas, Dylan admitted bitterly, and he has no scruples about using them when he feels his interests are threatened. And I'm a threat. Dylan took her hands in his. You're a threat to his version of who I should be. You're a threat to his plans to marry me off to the daughter of some other major businessman to create a corporate alliance. You're a threat to a world where love is considered a luxury businessmen can't afford. Sophia slowly pulled her hands away. Maybe we should... No, Dylan said firmly. We are not ending this because of my father. We are not going to let fear make our decisions for us. But what if he's right? What if we really are too different? Is that what you think? Sophia looked around the small shop, the old sewing machines, the modest fabrics, the small but love-filled world she had built, and then looked at Dylan with his expensive suit and his legacy of privilege. I don't know, she murmured honestly. Yesterday I felt sure we could overcome anything. Today the real world got in the way, Dylan finished. But that doesn't change what we feel for each other, doesn't it? Dylan moved closer until they were almost touching. Did you stop loving me in the last 3 hours? No, Sophia admitted. Neither did I. So we're going to face this together. At 3 o'clock, Dylan and Sophia arrived at the Moore Development's corporate headquarters in downtown Austin's financial district. The 20-story building was a monument to the Moore family's success and power, its glass and steel facade reflecting the Texas sky like a giant mirror. Sophia had never been in a place like this. The elevators were silent and swift, the lobby decorated with modern art that likely cost more than her entire house, and the employees were all dressed as if they were perpetually on their way to a major meeting. Nervous? Dylan asked as they rode up to the executive floor. Terrified, Sophia admitted. Remember, Dylan said, taking her hand, no matter what my father says, it doesn't change anything between us unless we decide it does. Raymond Moore's office was exactly what Sophia had imagined a corporate tycoon space would be. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, and the walls were covered with photos of Raymond with politicians, celebrities, and other powerful business leaders. Raymond Moore in person was more intimidating than Sophia had expected. At 58, he was an older, harder version of Dylan, with perfectly coiffed silver hair, an Italian suit that screamed power, and blue eyes that assessed people as if they were potential investments. Dylan, Raymond greeted without rising from his desk. And this must be Miss Miller. It wasn't an introduction. It was an appraisal. Dad, Dylan replied with controlled coldness. Sophia, my father, Raymond Moore. Sophia approached with all the dignity she could muster. Mr. Moore, it's a pleasure to meet you. Raymond studied her for a long moment that felt like an eternity. Sit, he finally commanded. What followed was the most uncomfortable conversation of Sophia's life. Raymond didn't yell, he didn't insult, he did nothing dramatic. Instead, he applied a subtle yet relentless psychological pressure that was far more effective than any direct confrontation. Miss Miller, Raymond began, I'm sure you are a lovely woman. Today's article certainly paints a colorful picture of your family and your life. Dad, Dylan warned. I'm speaking to Miss Miller, Dylan. Raymond didn't take his eyes off Sophia. As I was saying, I'm sure you're charming, but I have to wonder if you truly understand what it means to be publicly associated with my son. I think I understand that I love Dylan, Sophia replied, finding her voice. Love? Raymond let out a laugh that held no humor. Miss Miller, let me explain something about the world my son lives in. Every decision he makes is scrutinized by shareholders, business partners, banks, the media. His reputation isn't just personal, it's a business asset. I'm aware of that. Are you? Are you aware that Moore Developments is currently negotiating a $500 million project with international investors? Are you aware that those investors value stability, tradition, and predictability? Dylan stood up abruptly. That's enough. Sit down, Dylan. This is necessary. Raymond turned his attention back to Sophia. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Miss Miller, but you must understand there are expectations about the kind of woman who should be beside a man in Dylan's position. And what kind of woman is that? Sophia asked, feeling her temper begin to rise. A woman with a college education, a woman with appropriate social connections, a woman who understands how to navigate high society circles without creating incidents, like the one at the gala the other day. The comment about the gala was like a slap. Sophia felt all her insecurities, all her fears about not belonging in this world, crystallize in that moment. "Mr. Moore," Sophia said, her voice trembling slightly but firm, "I understand you're concerned about your son and your company, but I will not apologize for not being born into a wealthy family or for not having had the educational opportunities that your financial privilege provided for Dylan." "I'm not asking you to apologize," Raymond replied calmly. "I'm asking you to be realistic about what you can offer a man like my son." "Dad, stop it!" Dylan exploded, but Raymond continued, relentless. "Dylan deserves a partner who can be an asset to his career, not a liability. He deserves someone who can walk beside him in any social situation without needing explanations or apologies." Every word was a calculated blow, and Raymond knew exactly where he was hitting. Sophia felt all the doubts she had been suppressing rise in her throat like bile. "What if Dylan was happy with me?" Sophia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Happiness," Raymond said, "is a luxury that men in Dylan's position can't always afford." It was then that Dylan rose again, this time with a fury Sophia had never seen before. "You know what, Dad? You're right about one thing. Sophia can't offer social connections or a prominent last name, or the ability to navigate high society circles without making waves." Sophia felt her heart break. "Do you know what she can offer?" Dylan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She can offer honesty in a world full of lies. She can offer genuine love in a world where everything is transactional. She can offer a real connection to the humanity I lost years ago, navigating those social circles you value so much." "Dylan," Raymond began, "I'm not finished. You know what else she can offer? She can remind me why I started this company in the first place. She can remind me that success means nothing if you don't have someone to genuinely share it with. She can remind me that being a man doesn't mean sacrificing everything that makes you human for power." Raymond was silent for a moment, studying his son as if seeing him for the first time. "Are you finished?" he finally asked. "No, there's one more thing." Dylan turned to Sophia, who had tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "Sophia, can you step outside for a moment? I need to speak with my father. Alone." Sophia nodded and left the office on trembling legs. She sat in the waiting area, trying to process everything that had just happened. Raymond's words had articulated every fear she had been suppressing. Could she really be what Dylan needed? Or was she being selfish by holding on to a love that might limit him? Inside the office, father and son faced off in a battle that had been brewing for years. "Are you going to choose that woman over your family?" Raymond asked. "I'm going to choose love over fear," Dylan replied, "something you were never able to do." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I know why you're really doing this. It's not about the company or my reputation. It's because Sophia reminds you of what you lost when you decided money was more important than love." Raymond froze. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? You think I don't know about Maria Elena? You think I don't know that you loved her, but let her go because she wasn't appropriate for the Moore family?" Raymond's face paled. Maria Elena Guerrero had been the love of his youth, a schoolteacher he had chosen to let go because his family deemed her an unsuitable match for the Moore heir. "That was different," Raymond muttered. "Was it? Or did you just not have the courage to fight for what you wanted?" "Dylan, listen to me carefully, Dad. I am not going to make your mistake. I will not sacrifice my chance at happiness to keep up appearances. And if that means losing your approval or my place in this company, so be it." Raymond was silent for a long moment, wrestling with demons he had buried for decades. "Do you really love her?" he finally asked. "I love her more than I knew it was possible to love someone. And what if the cost is all of this?" Raymond gestured toward the office, toward the empire they had built together. "Then the cost is worth it." Outside, Sophia had made a decision. She rose from the waiting room chair and walked back toward the office. She opened the door without knocking and entered, interrupting the conversation between father and son. "Mr. Moore," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "You're right." Both Dylan and Raymond turned to her in surprise. "Sophia," Dylan asked. "Your father is right," Sophia repeated. "I don't have a college education. I don't have social connections. I don't understand the world you live in, Dylan, and I will probably always be an obstacle to your career." "Sophia, don't." "But there is one thing I do have," Sophia continued, ignoring Dylan's interruption and looking directly at Raymond. "I have integrity. I have the capacity to love without conditions, and I have the strength to walk away from someone I love if I believe it's what's best for them." "What are you saying?" Dylan asked, panic rising in his voice. Sophia turned to him, tears in her eyes but determination in her voice. I'm saying that maybe your father is right. Maybe we are too different. Maybe this is never going to work. No, Dylan said, moving toward her. You can't be serious. Can't I? Look what's happening, Dylan. We've been together a few weeks and we're already in the papers. You're already fighting with your family. We're already facing pressures that aren't going to disappear. So what? It matters because I don't want to be the reason you lose your family or your company. It matters because I don't want you to look at me in 5 years with resentment for everything you had to sacrifice for me. That will never happen. How can you be so sure? Dylan fell silent, struggling to find the right words. It was then that Raymond Moore did something completely unexpected. He went to his desk and took out an old yellowed photograph that had been kept in a bottom drawer for decades. Do you see this woman? He asked, showing them the photograph of a young woman with soft eyes and a radiant smile. Who is she? Sophia asked. Maria Elena Guerrero, the woman I loved and let go because she wasn't appropriate for the Moore family. Dylan and Sophia were stunned. Every day for the last 30 years, Raymond continued, his voice breaking, I have wondered what would have happened if I'd had the courage to fight for her. Every day I have regretted choosing security over love. Dad, Dylan murmured. She married a schoolteacher, Raymond went on. They had 3 children. They were poor but happy. And I married your mother for convenience, succeeded in business. But I never again felt what I felt with Maria Elena. The office was in absolute silence. Miss Miller, Raymond said finally, you're right. I'm afraid he'll make the same mistake I did. But my son is also right. I have no right to project my failures onto your love story. Sophia stood motionless, processing this unexpected revelation. But that doesn't change the practical realities, Raymond continued. You will face pressure. You will face criticism. You will face moments when you'll wonder if you made the right choice. So what do you suggest? Dylan asked. Raymond looked at them both for a long moment. I suggest that if you are really going to do this, you do it right. No half measures, no hiding. If you are going to be together, it will be openly, proudly, and with the family's support. What are you saying? Sophia asked. I'm saying that if my son is determined to follow his heart, then I'd rather have you as allies than as enemies. So I'm saying that maybe it's time the Moore family learns something about true love. Dylan felt as if the world had shifted in the space of one conversation. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life, Raymond replied. But there are conditions. What are they? Raymond looked directly at Sophia. I want you to come work with me. I'm sorry, Sophia asked, confused. I want you to come work for Moore Developments as Director of Interior Design, with a full salary, benefits, and the authority to create an entire department under your direction. Sophia felt dizzy. Mr. Moore, I don't have the credentials to... You have something better than credentials. You have genuine talent and an instinctive understanding of what makes a space feel like a home. And if you're going to be part of this family, I want you to be an equal, not a dependent. Dylan looked at his father in astonishment. Are you offering her a real job? I'm offering her a real career, with the opportunity to make a real difference in how we build communities. Sophia was silent, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. I need time to think about it, she finally murmured. Of course, Raymond replied. But don't take too long. As a businessman, I can tell you that good opportunities don't wait forever. When they left the building an hour later, Dylan and Sophia walked in silence for several blocks before either of them found their voice. What just happened up there? Sophia finally asked. I think my father just realized he's been living with regret for 30 years and doesn't want me to make the same mistake. And the job offer? The job offer is real, and it's exactly what you need to build the career you deserve. Sophia stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Dylan, this is too much. Everything is changing too fast. Are you scared? I'm terrified, Sophia admitted. This morning I was a seamstress working in a small shop. This afternoon I'm being offered a department head position at one of the biggest construction firms in Texas. And what scares you more, the responsibility or the success? Sophia considered the question honestly. I'm scared of losing myself. I'm scared of becoming someone I don't recognize trying to fit into this world. And what if you don't have to fit in? What if you can change the world to be more like you instead of changing yourself to be more like the world? That night, Sophia sat at the small kitchen table with Lucy and Robert, telling them everything that had happened. The job offer, Raymond's confession about Maria Elena, the possibility of a future she had never imagined. What do you think I should do, Dad? She finally asked. Robert, who had been listening to the whole story in silence, leaned forward in his chair. Honey, do you remember what your mother used to say about opportunities? What did she say? She said that real opportunities only knock once in a lifetime, and that the only way to truly fail is to not take the risk. But what if I fail? And what if you succeed? Lucy intervened. Sophia, You have a chance to use your talent on a scale you never imagined. You have a chance to create things that will touch the lives of thousands of families. And you have the chance, Robert added, to be with a man who clearly loves you enough to fight his own family for you. Sophia looked around the small kitchen where she had made so many important decisions in her life. Her eyes fell on the photograph of her mother they always kept on the table, Eleanor Miller smiling in one of her homemade dresses, radiant with pride in her work. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" she asked softly. "I think," Robert said with tears in his eyes, "your mother would be more proud of you than words can express." That night, Sophia made a decision that would change the rest of her life. She called Dylan and said simply, "I accept." "Accept what? The job or me?" "I accept everything," Sophia replied. "I accept the job. I accept the challenges. I accept the uncertainty. And I accept building a future with you, no matter what that means." "Are you sure?" "No," Sophia admitted honestly, "but I'm sure it's worth the risk." But neither of them knew that their story was about to take a turn that would test everything they had decided that night. Because sometimes, even when you think you've overcome all the obstacles, life has a way of presenting you with the biggest challenge when you least expect it. Chapter 6. 6 months after that life-changing conversation, Sophia Miller stood before the 15th floor windows of the Moore building, gazing out at the city of Austin as it spread before her like a living canvas. But her perspective had changed in ways she never would have imagined. The Department of Interior Design and Community Development, which she now directed, occupied the entire floor, with a team of 12 designers, 3 architects specializing in affordable housing, and 2 sociologists who helped to understand the specific cultural needs of each community they built for. What had begun as Dylan's idea to help Sophia had become the most innovative and socially responsible arm of Moore Developments. "Sophia," the voice of Karen Ruiz, her 45-year-old administrative assistant, broke through her thoughts. "The residents from Valle Verde are here for the final presentation." Sophia smiled, adjusting the blue silk blouse she had learned to pair with designer jeans, her own signature style that mixed elegance with accessibility. She had learned to dress for her new position without losing her essence, something that had been easier than she had feared. Valle Verde was her most ambitious project to date, a complex of 300 affordable homes that not only provided housing, but had been designed entirely with input from the families who would live there. For months, Sophia and her team had worked with single mothers, grandparents raising grandchildren, and working families, listening to their needs, their dreams, their ideas about what makes a space feel like a home. "Are you ready?" Karen asked. "More than ready," Sophia replied, grabbing the final blueprints and fabric samples she would be showing. The boardroom had been transformed for the occasion. Instead of the traditional conference table, Sophia had arranged circles of chairs where families could see and touch the samples, ask questions, and feel like part of the process rather than mere beneficiaries. "Good morning, everyone," Sophia began, radiant with a confidence she had developed over the past few months. "First of all, I want to thank you for letting us be part of your journey to your new homes." In the audience was Maria Santos, a 28-year-old single mother of 2 who had worked as a housekeeper her entire adult life and had never dreamed of owning her own home. There was Jose Hernandez, a 67-year-old grandfather who had raised his 5 grandchildren after his daughter died in an accident. And there was the entire Ramirez family, parents, 3 kids, and the grandmother, who had been living in a 1-bedroom apartment for 8 years. "As you know," Sophia continued, "Valle Verde isn't just a set of houses. It's a community designed specifically for families like yours, with your real needs and your real dreams in mind." She spent the next 2 hours showing every detail. The kitchens were designed with enough space for grandmothers to teach their grandchildren how to cook family recipes. The backyards had space for small vegetable gardens, because many families had expressed a desire to grow their own produce. There was a community center with a library, because education had been a constant priority in all their conversations. But what Sophia was most proud of were the textile details. Each house would have curtains made by a women's collective from the same neighborhood, using traditional patterns, but with colors customized to each family's preference. It was a project that generated local jobs while preserving cultural traditions. "Any questions?" Sophia asked at the end of the presentation. The first hand to go up was Maria Santos's. "Miss Sophia, is this real? Are we really going to have houses like this?" "It's completely real, Maria. And I want you to know this is just the beginning. You are going to be our partners in making Valle Verde the community it deserves to be." Tears began to flow freely around the room. Jose Hernandez approached Sophia, his own eyes full of tears. Ma'am, my wife died 10 years ago, and she always dreamed we'd have a house with a garden where she could plant her roses. I never thought it would be possible. It's going to be possible, Mr. Hernandez. And we're going to make sure that garden is perfect for the roses." After the residents left, filled with excitement and hope, Sophia remained alone in the boardroom, gathering the presentation materials. It was in moments like these that she realized how much her life had changed, but also how much she was still the same person who had sewn dresses in Mrs. Gable's little shop. "How did it feel?" a familiar voice asked from the doorway. Dylan was leaning against the frame, dressed in jeans and a cotton shirt. His weekend attire, which he had adopted after Sophia told him she liked him better when he looked human rather than corporate. "It felt like what I'm supposed to be doing with my life," Sophia answered honestly. Dylan walked over and took her in his arms, kissing her softly. After 6 months together, they had developed a comfortable intimacy that went far beyond physical attraction. They knew each other's work rhythms, hidden insecurities, and secret dreams. "Ready to go?" Dylan asked. "Where are we going?" "It's a surprise, but you'll need a jacket and comfortable shoes." An hour later, they were driving through the outskirts of Austin in the Ford pickup Dylan had kept specifically for adventures like this. Sophia had learned that one of the things she loved most about Dylan was his capacity for spontaneity, something he had discovered after he stopped living under the constant pressure of his father's expectations. "Any clues?" Sophia asked as she watched the Texas hill country landscape roll by. "Remember the first night you had dinner at my house?" Dylan asked. Of course she remembered. It had been 3 months after she started working at Moore Developments when she had finally felt comfortable enough to accept his invitation to the mansion in Westlake Hills. She had expected to be intimidated by the luxury, but Dylan had cooked for her simple pasta with tomato sauce because he'd found out it was one of her favorite dishes. "You told me that night that your secret dream was to have a small house in the country where you could have a sewing studio and a garden." "Yes," Sophia replied, wondering where this conversation was going. "And you said it would be perfect if it had a view of the hills and enough space for your family to visit on weekends." Sophia's heart began to beat faster. "Dylan, what are you up to?" Instead of answering, Dylan turned onto a gravel road Sophia hadn't seen before. He drove for 5 more minutes until they reached a small hill that offered a perfect view of the sprawling hill country. And there at the top of the hill was a house. It wasn't a mansion like Dylan's. It was a 2-story house of stone and wood, with large windows that captured the view of the hills, a garden that had obviously been planned with care, and what appeared to be a separate building that would be perfect for a studio. "Dylan," Sophia whispered, getting out of the truck with trembling legs. "What is this?" "It's your house," Dylan replied simply. "Well, it's going to be your house, if you want it." Sophia stood motionless, trying to process what she was seeing. "My house? I bought it 3 months ago. I've been working with an architect to remodel it exactly as you described it that night." Dylan came to her, taking her trembling hands. "The studio has the best natural light the architect has ever seen. The garden has space for vegetables and flowers, and there are enough rooms for your dad, Lucy, and even Mrs. Gable to come and stay whenever they want." Tears began to roll down Sophia's cheeks. "Why would you do this?" "Because I love you, because I want to give you everything you've ever dreamed of, and because—" Dylan dropped to one knee, pulling a small blue velvet box from his pocket. Sophia felt the world come to a complete stop. "Because I want to build a life with you here, in this house, with this view, creating memories that will last a lifetime." He opened the box, revealing a ring that made Sophia start to sob. It wasn't a giant, flashy diamond. It was a modest emerald surrounded by tiny diamonds, set on a gold band designed to look like a delicate branch with leaves. "Sophia Miller," Dylan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Will you marry me?" Sophia looked at him through her tears, this man who had entered her life like a storm and transformed it in ways she never could have imagined. This man who had fought his family for her, who had created professional opportunities for her, who had listened to her secret dreams and made them real. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." Dylan stood and kissed her as he slipped the ring on her finger, and Sophia knew this was the moment that would divide her life into before and after. Everything that had happened before had led her to this moment, to this man, to this life she had never dared to dream of. "Want to see the inside?" Dylan asked when they finally parted. For the next hour, Dylan showed her every room of the house that would become their home. The studio was equipped with the best sewing machines, perfect work tables, and shelving for organizing fabrics and materials. The kitchen was big enough for family parties, but cozy enough for intimate dinners. The master bedroom had windows that overlooked the garden and the hills. "How did you know exactly what I wanted?" Sophia asked, standing in what would be her personal studio. Because I've been paying attention since the first day I met you, Dylan replied. Because I fell in love not just with who you are, but with who you dream of being. That night they had dinner in the garden of the new house, with food they'd bought from the nearest town and a bottle of champagne Dylan had brought for the occasion. As the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they talked about their future. When do you want to get married? Dylan asked. I want the wedding here, Sophia replied immediately. In the garden, with our families, our real friends, the people who have supported us. You don't want a big wedding at some fancy hotel. What for? To impress people we barely know? Sophia shook her head. I want a wedding that's real, like us. And when? Sophia considered the question. How about we wait until the first family moves into Valle Verde? I want our marriage to begin when that project is complete. In 6 months? In 6 months. That night, when they returned to the city, Sophia went straight to her family's house to share the news. She found Robert watching television in the living room and Lucy studying at the kitchen table. Family meeting, Sophia announced, holding out her left hand to show them the ring. Lucy's shrieks of joy were probably heard 3 blocks away. Robert got up from his chair, his back now fully healed, and hugged his eldest daughter with tears in his eyes. Are you happy, honey? He asked. I'm happier than I knew it was possible to be, Sophia answered honestly. Then we're happy. Over the next few weeks, news of the engagement spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Gable cried with joy and immediately began planning the most beautiful wedding dress she had ever created. Madison, now 16, and in her first year of college studying graphic design, thanks to an education fund Dylan had quietly established, insisted on designing the invitations. But the biggest surprise came when Raymond Moore showed up at Mrs. Gable's shop one afternoon, asking to speak with Sophia. Mr. Moore? Sophia greeted him, surprised to see him there. What brings you here? I wanted to apologize, Raymond said directly, for the way I treated you when we first met, and I wanted to ask you a favor. What kind of favor? I would like to ask you to allow me to pay for your wedding dress, as a wedding gift, but also as an apology for ever doubting that you were perfect for my son. Sophia was speechless for a moment. Mr. Moore, that's very generous, but please, Raymond interrupted. My son is going to marry the woman he loves, something I never had the courage to do. Allow me to be part of that celebration in any way I can. Sophia looked at this man who had gone from being her greatest opponent to one of her most unexpected allies. All right, she said finally, but on one condition. What is it? I want you to dance with me at the wedding, because you're going to be my family too. Raymond felt his eyes fill with tears. It would be an honor. The months that followed were a whirlwind of wedding preparations and work. The Valle Verde project was completed right on schedule, and the first family, Maria Santos and her 2 children, moved in a week before the wedding. Sophia was there to hand over the keys personally, and seeing the tears of joy in Maria's eyes was one of the most fulfilling moments of her professional life. Miss Sophia, Maria told her, as they explored the new house, you changed our lives. No, Sophia replied. You allowed me to be part of changing your lives. There's a difference. The wedding day dawned perfect, a cloudless blue sky, a perfect temperature, and a gentle breeze that made the flowers in the garden of the new house dance. Sophia woke up in her old room at the family home, surrounded by Lucy, Mrs. Gable, and her cousins, who had come from different parts of Texas for the celebration. Nervous? Lucy asked while helping with her makeup. Not at all, Sophia answered honestly. I feel like I've been waiting for this day my entire life. The dress Mrs. Gable had created was a masterpiece, blending traditional elegance with modern touches. It was ivory silk with gold thread embroidery that told Sophia's story, flowers representing her growth, birds symbolizing her freedom, and tiny houses honoring her work with the families of Valle Verde. You look beautiful, honey, Robert murmured when he saw her fully dressed. There were tears in his eyes, but also a deep pride. Your mother would be so proud. She's here, Sophia replied, touching her mother's pearl necklace she had chosen to wear. I can feel her with me. The ceremony took place in the garden of the new house, exactly as Sophia had dreamed. There were 150 guests, family, friends from the neighborhood, employees from Moore Developments, some of the families from Valle Verde, and yes, a few of Dylan's business colleagues, but only those who truly knew them and supported their relationship. Madison was one of the bridesmaids, radiant in a pink dress that perfectly complemented her vibrant personality. Lucy was the maid of honor, beautiful in sky blue, and clearly thrilled to see her big sister so happy. But the most emotional moment came when Dylan appeared at the end of the aisle they had created, between the chairs. He wore an ivory linen suit, custom-made to complement Sophia's dress. When their eyes met, Sophia felt everything else disappear. This was the man who had seen beyond the circumstances of her birth to see who she truly was. This was the man who had fought for her, who had created opportunities for her, who had made her dreams come true, not because he felt he had to rescue her, but because he loved her enough to want to see her shine. "Dearly beloved," began Father Michael, who had baptized Sophia as a baby and now had the honor of marrying her, "we are gathered here today to celebrate not just the union of Dylan and Sophia, but the triumph of true love over all the barriers society tries to impose." The vows they exchanged were personal, written by them, filled with specific promises and references to their journey together. "Sophia," Dylan said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion, "I promise to always see you as I saw you that first night, as the most authentic, strongest, most beautiful woman I had ever met. I promise to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and stand by your side through the challenges. I promise to never take the gift of your love for granted." "Dylan," Sophia responded, tears streaming freely down her cheeks, "I promise to love you not in spite of our differences, but because of the way those differences make us stronger together. I promise to remain myself as we grow together. I promise to build with you not just a life, but a legacy of love that inspires others to fight for what is real." When Father Michael pronounced them husband and wife, the garden exploded in celebration. A mariachi band began to play, confetti rained down, and the party that followed was exactly what Sophia had wanted: authentic, joyful, and memorable for all the right reasons. During their first dance, as Dylan twirled her under the lights they had strung in the trees, Sophia looked around at all the faces she loved. "What are you thinking about?" Dylan asked. "I'm thinking that a year ago, I was just a seamstress dreaming of something more. And now? And now I'm a woman who has everything she never dared to dream of, married to the man who made it possible for those dreams to come true." "No," Dylan corrected, kissing her softly as they continued to dance. "Now you're a woman who had the courage to chase her dreams and who turned out to be exactly what I needed to find mine." The party continued well into the early morning. There were emotional speeches, traditional dances, and enough food to feed the entire neighborhood. Raymond Moore kept his promise to dance with Sophia, and during that dance he whispered in her ear, "Thank you for saving my son. Thank you for raising the man who saved me," Sophia replied. When the last guests had finally gone and Dylan and Sophia were alone in their new house as husband and wife, they sat in the garden under the stars, still in their wedding attire. "Any regrets?" Dylan asked. "Only one," Sophia replied. "What's that?" "That my mother couldn't be here to meet you. She would have liked you very much." "Do you think she would have approved?" "I think she would have seen what I see, a man who loves with his whole heart and who makes me want to be the best version of myself." A year later, Dylan and Sophia stood in the same office, where Raymond had once tried to tear them apart, but this time they were there for a completely different reason. Sophia was 6 months pregnant, radiant with the glow of pregnancy and the satisfaction of a woman who had found her place in the world. "The project is exceeding all expectations," Caroline reported at the monthly board meeting. "Valle Verde has received national recognition as a model for affordable housing development. We've received requests from 3 different states to replicate the model." "And the numbers?" Raymond asked, though everyone knew he had become the biggest fan of Sophia's department. "Sophia's department has generated more goodwill and positive brand recognition for the company than all of our marketing campaigns from the last 5 years combined," Dylan answered, obvious pride in his voice. After the meeting, Sophia stayed in her office working on the plans for her next project, a series of community centers that would include daycares, trade workshops, and spaces for female entrepreneurs to sell their products. "How does it feel to be the most admired executive in Austin?" Dylan asked, entering her office with 2 cups of chamomile tea. "It feels like the place I was always meant to be," Sophia replied, gratefully accepting the tea. "You know what's the most incredible thing?" "What?" "That it all started with a humiliation at a fancy party. If those women hadn't treated me so cruelly that night, maybe we never would have spoken." "Oh, we would have spoken," Dylan said with certainty. "Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe it would have been under different circumstances, but we would have found our way to each other." "How can you be so sure?" "Because some people are destined to meet. And we, my love, were destined long before that night." That afternoon they drove to Valle Verde for the inauguration of the community center, the final element of the project. Sophia, despite her advanced pregnancy, had insisted on being present for the ribbon cutting. "Mrs. Mendoza," said Maria Santos, who now worked as the center's community coordinator, We have something special for you." They led her to a wall in the center's lobby where there was a bronze plaque that read, "The Eleanor Miller Community Center, in honor of Eleanor Miller and in recognition of her daughter, Sophia Mendoza, who inherited her vision that hands that create beauty never know poverty of the soul." Sophia burst into tears reading the plaque. It was the greatest honor she could have ever received. "How did you know?" she asked through her tears. "Your sister told us the story of your mother," Jose Hernandez explained, "and we all agreed the center should bear her name because everything you've done comes from what she taught you." That night, lying in their bed in the house that was now completely theirs, Dylan held Sophia as she described all the day's events. "You know what my favorite part of this whole story is?" Dylan asked. "What?" "That we're raising our son in a world where the barriers that once seemed insurmountable no longer exist for him." Sophia placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby move within her. "Boy or girl, do you think they'll ever understand how extraordinary their story is? I think they'll grow up thinking it's normal for people to fight for what they love, to work hard to build something meaningful, and for real love to overcome any obstacle. And that's not normal?" "It should be," Dylan replied, kissing her forehead. "And maybe, thanks to people like you, someday it will be." 5 years later, Sophia Mendoza was one of the most respected businesswomen in Texas. Her department had expanded nationally, creating sustainable communities in 12 different states. She had received accolades from the federal government, appeared in international architecture and design magazines, and been invited to speak at conferences around the world. But the accomplishment she was most proud of had nothing to do with awards or public recognition. It was a Sunday afternoon, and she was sitting in the garden of her home, watching her 4-year-old son, Santiago, play with the building blocks Dylan had given him. Lucy, now a successful pediatrician, was there with her own baby. Robert, who had decided to retire early to be a full-time grandfather, was teaching Santi how to plant seeds in the vegetable patch. "Mommy," Santi asked, running up to her with dirt on his hands and a heart-melting smile, "did you and Daddy meet at a party?" "Yes, my love, we met at a party." "And was it love at first sight?" Sophia looked over at Dylan, who was grilling burgers on the patio, and smiled. "It wasn't love at first sight, Santi. It was something better." "What's better than love at first sight?" "Recognition at first sight. When we saw each other, we recognized something we had been looking for without knowing what it was." "And what was it?" "The other half of ourselves." Santiago considered this with the seriousness of a 4-year-old. "Am I going to find the other half of myself someday?" "If you're lucky," Sophia replied, hugging him, "you'll find someone who loves you exactly as you are, but who also inspires you to become the best version of yourself. Like Daddy with you, like Daddy with me." That night, after everyone had gone home and Santi was asleep, Dylan and Sophia sat in their garden as they did most nights, watching the stars over the Texas hill country. "Do you ever imagine what your life would have been like if we hadn't met?" Sophia asked. "No," Dylan answered immediately. "Why would I torture myself imagining a life without you? You're never curious. The only curiosity I have is about our future together, about what we'll build next, what adventures we'll have, what Santi will be like when he grows up." Sophia snuggled closer to him on the porch swing they had installed on their favorite tree. "I love you, Dylan Moore. I love you, Sophia Mendoza. My partner in everything, the mother of my son, the woman who taught me that real love isn't a distraction from life's purpose, it is life's purpose." And under the infinite stars of the Texas sky, in the garden of the home they had built together, surrounded by the love of the family they had created and the community they had served, Sophia knew she had found something many people search a lifetime for and never find. She had found her exact place in the world beside the exact right man, living the exact life she was meant to live. The girl from East Riverside who had once sewn dresses for Sweet 16s while dreaming of something more, had become a woman who had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of thousands of families through her work. And she had done it not by sacrificing who she was, but by discovering who she was destined to be. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the most painful moments. Sometimes humiliation becomes the doorway to dignity. Sometimes the woman the world decides isn't enough turns out to be exactly what the world needed. And sometimes, just sometimes, true love doesn't just triumph. It transforms everything it touches into something more beautiful than anyone had ever imagined possible. What did you think of this story of love, resilience, and dignity? Have you ever lived through a moment that felt like the end, but was actually the beginning of something beautiful? We'd love to read your experience in the comments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the power of true love and the strength of the human spirit. Tell us which beautiful city you're reading from, and share what kind of story you'd like to read next. Do you prefer romance, family drama, stories of personal growth, or maybe something with a touch of mystery? Thanks for joining us on this emotional journey. Remember, as Sophia and Dylan taught us, true love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone who loves you perfectly imperfect. Until the next story.